Welcome to Grow Virtually, an online horticultural educational program presented by the Master Gardener Volunteers of Cobb County. Under the guidance of the University of Georgia Cooperative Extension Service, we grow gardeners.
So we'll get started. So first, you kind of need to know your goals. So if you want to save seeds so that you can maintain a plant that you love, if you want to develop a line of seeds that is special for your own yard because it does particularly well in your yard, or you notice that there's a plant that is got exactly the right tomatoes that you love and the other ones don't. Maybe you want to save seeds from that one. You may want to just kind of be part of the historical stream of gardeners and farmers, through human history who have saved seeds to regrow the next year so they could actually just have food. And so that's another reason. Some people just want to save money and all that other stuff is just a little happy extra. And some people just, want to be one of the cool kids because saving seeds is cool. It's what cool kids do, right? It's important. And then you need to kind of understand your limits, for your garden space. What do you have room for? Your time? What do you have available to plant? What do you have room to store? Do you have persistence? There's a lot of things to kind of think about when you're deciding that you're going to save seeds from your garden crops. And I'll let Linda Lopez in. But after you've got your head kind of all together, that's what you're going to do, and you have a kind of a thought, then you just follow all these basic steps. And it's like not that hard. We're going to talk about all like 5 of these things. You can choose the seeds you want to save, grow out the plants, collect the seeds, clean the seeds, and store the seeds. The first 2 are the ones that it's important to get right up at the front so that the last 3 are more successful. And so we're going to kind of spend more time on those. That should be fine though, right? So there is a legal issue. You don't even really think about it when you're a gardener because usually we can just grow anything. But there are protected varieties. They are patented. And so it would be a good idea to not save seeds from those because they're legally protected. And they're usually labeled. I don't know if you can see it on your screen. There's a PVP initials somewhere on the slide. Somewhere on the catalog or the website or the seed packet, it will say that it's protected. In this particular example, like I circled, I underlined the PVP so you could see it. And then, but it's on there somewhere. So kind of hunt for that. And then some people would like to avoid growing genetically engineered or genetically modified seeds. And you're in luck because they're not going to sell them to gardeners because we're very DIY, do it, independent kind of people. And we are likely to save seeds even though they don't want us to. So they don't even let us have a chance. They're not going to give those to us. People in agriculture who buy seeds to grow that are genetically modified have to sign agreements that they will not save those seeds. And, we're crazy, so that's not going to happen for us. And then there's this biological issue that some seeds are hybrids. They are crosses between 2 different parents. Now, if it was genetically engineered or genetically modified, those parents would be wildly different. It could be a tomato crossed with a bacteria, it's tucked in there, some genetic code. But in a hybrid, it's just 2 different tomatoes or 2 different peppers in this case. This is example is the Cornito Giallo F1 hybrid organically grown seed from Johnny Selected Seeds. And so if I save seeds from these Cornito Giallo seeds and then grew those, the following year, those babies, might look like Cornito Giallo, but they might look very different. They might be like, the mama or the papa or a great granddad. somewhere else further back in the genetic history that could come popping out of those babies, it might be very different and not what I wanted. So if you want to maintain that exact, like if you love cornito giallo, like you just have to buy those seeds, because the safe seeds might be like these, but they might not. It's kind of a gamble, I think. So, and then a lot of people try to like save money by using grocery store produce for their seeds, instead of seed packets, which can be pricey. But a lot of times grocery store produce is often from hybrid plants, just like those cornito giallo peppers. So you look at this pepper though, and you think, well, I already paid like, $3 for this pepper, and look, it's full of seeds. Why shouldn't I grow those? Sometimes it works out great. I've talked to people who have great luck with grocery store produce, but I've also talked with people who had terrible, experience with getting seeds from their grocery store produce. And so that's another gamble for you to think about, if you're tempted to go that way. There are lots of other options out there. These open pollinated seeds, like if it doesn't say F1, it doesn't say PVP, then it's probably an open pollinated plant. Like this one says it got a big banner across the top, heirloom. So you know that an heirloom variety is going to be open pollinated. It will produce, if I save seeds from San Marzano tomato peppers this summer and I replant them the next summer, I'm going to get San Marzano tomatoes. And they will still be the same summer after summer after summer as I save those seeds, assuming I don't accidentally get them crossed with some other kind of tomato. But that's a great option, is to just, look for an open pollinated heirloom seeds. That's what you want. They will breed true generation after generation after generation. That's what we want. How are we going to choose our varieties to grow for saving seeds? We want to make sure they're legal to use. They're not patented. They don't have that PVP, that they will breed true. So they're open pollinated. They meet whatever goals we have set for our garden. And we understand how long it will take before the plants make seeds, and that we have room in our gardens to make it all work. The length of time before plants make seeds is kind of tricky, I guess. Some of the plants, some of our seeds, like we harvest the fruit when it's mature, so it's easy to collect the seeds. Like tomatoes, we harvest them ripe, and so they're mature enough to save seeds from. If we were saving red or yellow peppers, they've already reached maturity. Green bell peppers are not mature, and they need to get to their full color to save seeds successfully. And but like winter squash, like the butternuts in this picture, like that's mature butternut, and they will have mature seeds inside. So it's easy to save those. Whereas green beans, we harvest those immature. So we would have to leave the plants longer in the garden to get seeds to save. Just something to think about when you're planning how you're going to make this all work. So, and also, annual crops are setting seed all in one season. Biennial crops, which you all know about, take 2 or more growing seasons to make seeds. And that's another, so they will be in the garden for longer and take up space. So if you have a small garden, biennial crops are kind of more of a problem to save seeds from. Like in Kennesaw, I would plant kale in the late summer, for my garden, to harvest and eat kale through the fall and winter and early spring. But then in the summer, early summer, they would send up a stalk out of the middle, and it would flower and make seeds. So that was basically a full year in the garden if I wanted to save seeds for kale. So that's a thing to think about. There's so much. And the next is to think about the pollination, because that affects how you're going to choose plants that you want to save seeds from. Self-pollinated plants, it's one kind, like beans and lettuce, everything they need to make seeds is inside the flower, and the pollen from that plant can pollinate that plant. So it doesn't have to get pollen from another plant. It's all good to go, all inside the neat little package of the flower. Some crops are wind pollinated and some crops are insect pollinated. And wind pollinated plants and insect pollinated plants usually need, more plants, obviously, especially insect pollinated ones, because some of those insect pollinated plants, like the pollen in one flower, cannot pollinate that flower. It needs to be from another plant. The pollen needs to come from another plant before the plant will set fruit to make seeds. It's and if you don't get it right, you risk inbreeding depression. Are you getting depressed yet? So when there are not enough plants grown for cross-pollinating, over time in the future generations, your crops can lose their productivity and then be less healthy. That is not a problem with self-pollinated crops, because they can pollinate with their own problem with pollen without having any of that loss of productivity and health. They're good to go. So they are basically, inbreeders are the ones that can self-pollinate with no bad effects, and the outbreeders are the ones that suffer from inbreeding depression. It's a little confusing, but the outbreeders need lots of cross-pollination to maintain genetic diversity. They have to have it. I don't know why there's a difference. I'm sure someone knows, but the ones that need to cross-pollinate, the outbreeders, are like all the brassica family, the cabbage, the broccoli, kale, collards, the beets, squash, corn, cucumbers. But the inbreeders, the self-pollinating ones that are happy with their own personal pollen, are the peas, tomatoes, peppers, green beans, lettuce, okra. So those are all like good to go, good choices. So easiest for beginners are those annuals that are self-pollinated inbreeders. And the list is there again. Like, this is my provider bush beans. And look how beautiful and colorful they are. And they all look pretty much the same. It's a small crop, but they were fun to save. So how many do I need to grow for each kind of crop? That's to avoid that inbreeding depression. So in general, this is like lots of different sources. The general recommendation is to save seeds from 20 inbreeding plants and 100 outbreeding plants to maintain good diversity. But home gardeners never grow that many. I mean, we just don't. We can't. And so if you look at and we save seeds anyway, and successfully. So we don't always have to follow 100% the rules. Just keep that in mind. But like, for example, like, how many do I need to grow, to save? How many plants do I need to grow for the variety I want? So the recommendations are all over the map. I've checked lots of sources, including Seed Savers Exchange, the Organic Seed Alliance, Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, which posts recommendations. Anywhere from 1 to 10 plants for tomatoes, for southern peas, 1 to 20 plants, okra, 1 to 6, anything in the brassica family, 5 to 75. I've actually seen bigger numbers, and corn, 10 to 250. And I think 10 is probably too few for corn. But over on the left is my arugula patch that's growing out in the garden right now. And I have more than enough arugula, but when it starts to, it's in the brassica family plant. So when it starts to flower, I'm probably gonna just leave a strip along one edge, like 10 inches wide, of those plants that are there. And it'll be, 20 or 30 plants that I leave to go to flower and set seed for the arugula. I mean, they're pretty small plants, so I have room for that in my garden. And it will be fun to save. I think will be a lot of fun to save arugula. I haven't really done that yet, so I'm pretty excited. And then sometimes if you're growing 2 kinds of a crop, it helps, you don't have to, it helps to separate them some way so they won't cross, because some of those self-pollinating plants, like tomatoes and peppers, can also be cross-pollinated by insects because, insects are crazy and so are plants. In my own garden in Kennesaw, I found that my tomatoes crossed and I lost some varieties and I had to start over with more seeds because I didn't leave enough space. Um, I've talked to other people who haven't had any trouble, in their gardens with cross pollination of tomatoes. And so I think, look at your garden. Um, and if you have a lot of insects, a lot of pollinators, it's going to be more of an issue. But also for tomatoes, especially the potato leaf kind, um, their flowers are kind of more open. And so it's easier for bees to get in there and get the pollen than the more modern tomatoes. The flowers are kind of more closed up and everything's tucked in better. So you want to watch out for that. Um, but there are ways you can isolate your variety so you can still grow more than one if you want. You don't have to, but you can and still save seeds. So you can do distance. Wind pollinated crops need the most distance between varieties. Cell pollinated crops are the least likely to cross when they're nearby. But again, from all those sources I named before, Seed Savers Exchange and the Organic Seed Alliance and Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, these are kind of the distances they recommend. For tomatoes, again, I found that 5 feet wasn't enough, but when I put things 30 feet, that was good. So anywhere between 5 to 320 feet is recommended. Peppers from 40 feet to 800, corn a quarter mile to 5 miles, peas either like slap up next to each other, no distance at all, or up to 20 feet, kind of depending on, who I was reading. So for peppers, like most of us don't have 40 feet that we can separate our pepper varieties. And we usually grow them like all together, like in one bed. So there's other options for isolating things. You can, for big flowers, like squashes that are huge, you can actually, when you see that a bud is getting close and it's going to probably open tomorrow, you can tape it shut at the top. Just go through your whole patch and tape them shut. Or for smaller flowers like peppers, you can put a little bag over them, not a plastic bag, but something mesh made out of tulle, maybe a little, ties a wad of tulle around it so that insects cannot get in. And then when it looks like the flowers have opened, go around from flower to flower to flower to flower to flower with a paintbrush and get pollen and move them around. Rebag them all so you make sure that insects can't get in there. And do them one variety at a time. So a different paintbrush for each variety of pepper so that you wouldn't mix up your pollen, or for the kinds of squashes that you're trying to save. So that's one way. Another option is to grow a really tall crop between two varieties of something. And that's not perfect, but it's less fussy than, hand pollinating with paintbrush and, tying things around flowers until you see that they've set fruit with the pollen you gave them, at which point you can take the bag off and then tie a little thing on there to show this one I'm saving for seeds and don't eat it. After all that work, that would be a disaster, right? To eat that one. And another option is to plant them at different times so that they're in flower at different times and you're saving seeds at different times. Like I plant provider bush beans, or I did, in Kennesaw in the spring for my spring green beans. And then after those, keeled over and were done, after a few weeks, I would plant Joni bush beans as my second crop that would mature in September and October. So that I was saving seeds at different times of the summer and they couldn't possibly cross. So that's helpful. And it worked. So again, like how important is it that we're not having things cross to keep the genetics all the same? It just kind of depends on what you want. You might be fine with things crossing because you get all kinds of funny new things. But if you want to keep a variety, it's important to kind of keep that in mind. And then also think about your risks of inbreeding depression. But also be aware that most seed varieties drift a little bit anyway. There's little genetic changes, little mutations, little things that happen, glitches, whatever, that change your seed variety. I'm sure that like the Rutgers tomato that we have now is not the Rutgers tomato that was developed in the 40s. It's very different. Things have happened. It's one of the things they're actually trying to work backwards toward. It's one of the research projects I read about. They're trying to like refine the original Rutgers. I don't know how they're going to do that, but it's the plan because someone thinks it's important. So after you got your crops all grown and they're planted and they're in the right numbers, so next you need to think about observing your plants carefully. Like when I had my okra patch this summer, everything was the same except one plant did not grow very tall. It wasn't the same and it wasn't flowering. And I didn't want to, wasn't flowering at first, but then it would have later, I'm sure. So you don't want to choose seeds from a plant that looks like it's very different, or it has a trait that you don't want, like it's stunted, it's diseased, it's not producing well. Like I pulled out that little okra plant because I didn't want the pollen from that to mix in with the pollen from a okra that I wanted to save. So kind of be aware, and in your patch, it's better to plant a few more than you think you're going to want to save for seeds so that you have the ability and the option to pull a couple out if you don't like how they look. And avoid like the year, like these are Joni beans here in this picture, they look so sad. They got just moldy. They wouldn't, it wouldn't stop raining. It wouldn't stop raining. It wouldn't stop raining. And I did not save seeds from these because they were moldy. I brought them in to dry and it was just a disaster. So I was really glad that the year before I had saved plenty of seeds from the Joni beans so that I could, have them anyway the following year. It didn't matter that I lost this crop. So you're collecting the seeds. You're going to get them from mature fruits. So again, like green peppers, it's not normally the mature color. Cucumbers, we eat them as an immature stage. So if you want to collect cucumber seeds, they have to be those giant yellow blimps that you would never eat. So think about that. Dry seeds are easy to collect. They can be, shaken or scraped out of the fruit, or it might be clumps of flowers, like lettuce. You're going to save from flowers. And then wet seeds can be scooped or squished out. It's not that hard. And some, if they have a lot of tiny seeds, like this is this year's amaranth, you push them through a screen. You can throw them up in the air and winnow them, or, the big ones like beans, you can hand separate. That's very easy. Wet seeds is more complicated, but it's still not that hard. Like tomatoes and winter squash and cucumbers. They're all easier to clean if you soak them first to kind of get the pulp softer to separate. And when they are separated, it's nice to know that the mature seeds sink so that you can find those and you don't have to save the floaters because they're not going to work. So case by case. Beans and peas, you collect them when they are so dry that when you shake the pod, it makes noise. And they're easy to remove the seeds, but they're probably not completely dry. So they'll need to be set in a basket or on a cardboard tray to dry some more. Here in the humid Southeast, nothing ever really completely dries out in the garden. Tomatoes, it's a lot of text, isn't it? It's instructions. So you squish out the jelly mass, that's between the little dividers inside the tomato. because that gelatin mass is where the seeds are. Put that in a cup, add some water and stir it up and let it sit for about 3 days until it gets just nasty. That's why I've never taken a picture of it. It's just disgusting. Mold is going to form on the surface of that water. And so when you see it's moldy on top, that's when you add a little more water, kind of stir it gently, to let the good seeds kind of fall out of the mess, and then scrape that moldy stuff off the top, and then strain and rinse the good seeds and put them on a plate to dry. Don't put them on a paper towel. They will completely, totally glue themselves to the paper towel and you'll never get them off. So be sure and put them on a plate, because that will give them the best chance, and you the best chance, of actually scraping them off the plate at some time in the future, and when they're fully dry, so that you can store them. Peppers are easy. Just make sure they're mature peppers. It's best if you let them even start to dry on the plant, but most of us can't go that far. We just can't. We just can't. But you can see these are Tabasco peppers from this year's garden. The yellow ones are not mature. The red ones are. And actually in the back, the picture is kind of wrong. Are dried ones that were dried on the plate, dried in the dish. But you scrape the seeds out and just let them dry some more. Because these are Tabasco peppers, I definitely would wear gloves, because otherwise, it will be very burning, an awful thing. Now, lettuce is one of the very first plants I saved seeds from. And these are not lettuce seeds, but it's the same idea, because it's a puff, like a dandelion puff, because lettuces are in the same family as dandelions. So, and the good thing about lettuce as a seed to save is that you can harvest leaves off your lettuce plant, all spring, until they start to taste too bitter and the middle stem starts to elongate. That's where the flowers will be later. So you just leave that in the garden. It doesn't take a ton of room. You just let those seed heads start to dry on the plant, out there in the garden, unless it's too rainy. But you can either like cut off the whole plant at some point and bring it into dry, or you can collect the seed heads as you see them, looking like this picture. They're going to look a lot like that picture of just dandelion puffs. The trick with lettuces is cleaning the seeds, because they're puffs, right? So I read in Seed to Seed by Suzanne Ashworth, a book about seed saving, that you run the puffs over a screen for the seeds to fall through and separate from the puffs. And I thought, okay, I'll do that. And I looked at, searched the garage for a screen that was like the right size. And I finally found a piece that would work. And I started to do that. And then like the puff part started flying all over the room. I mean, the seeds fell through, but there was stuff everywhere in the air. So that did not really work out for me. I found though that if I just like grab the puffs and then grab the seeds, then I could just drop the seeds into a dish, and that worked great. So you may need to experiment some with your seed sorting technique. It happens. Okra, it's important to allow the pod to mature and dry on the plant. This one is from this summer. And I marked it with a twine so that I could remember to not pick it. All the ones I wanted to save, as the summer went on, I marked. It was not an easy thing. I keep wanting to pick those. So mark it in some way is very important, but you just let it dry on the plant and then bring it in and split open the pod and get the seeds out. And they don't take any cleaning at all. Each pod has anywhere between 50 and 80 seeds inside of it. So I am like flush with okra seeds. And just need to make sure that the seeds are fully dry before they are stored. And so you can probably get like a theme here, fully dry. So before you package the seeds, they need to be very dry. We say 14% moisture, and that's really not something that at home we can measure, but seeds should snap and not bend, Or like if you whack one with a hammer, it should break, it should shatter and not just dent. That's how you're going to tell. So if you can't get it air dry just from your house because it's the humid southeast, you can put them in a dehydrator set at 85 degrees, but no higher than that. Or you can store them with a little one of those silica gel drying packs. That can help. But remember how important it is to label what you've collected, and any notes that you might have. So like this, like these are seeds I have saved this year, just recently, like anise hyssop, okra, that's my okra, some southern peas and a wildflower that I want to get started in my yard. It's important. And then storing them, like we're getting near like the important part, right? Store the seeds, cool, dry, dark, and labeled, right? In containers that keep out humidity. Ziploc bags do not keep out humidity. So that's not a good choice. The canning jar, you know, if the lids have that little rubber gasket, that's excellent for helping seal up the seeds. And that box there is one that has a gasket in the track of the lid. And that also helps keep out humidity. So store them somewhere cool. I keep mine in the fridge. Other people keep theirs in the freezer. You know, whatever you have space for, what you can do. But you need to be sure that when you pull the container out of the refrigerator or freezer, before you want to use the seeds, that you let it sit to reach room temperature before you open it. This is one I have trouble with, and I have, you know, ended up with some damp seeds in the past. Because what happens is if it's cold in the box or the jar and you open it, then moisture from the air will condense on those seed packets. And wet seeds, damp seeds, you know, lose their ability to grow over time. So you want to keep them as dry as you can so they will last as long as they can. If you do a good job of growing your seeds, selecting your seeds, cleaning your seeds, drying your seeds, and saving your seeds, then you'll be able to use those seeds for several years before you need to do that crop again. This is like one of the beauties of doing it yourself, is that when I save my own lettuce seeds, they're good for like 3 years, 4 years, no problem. But if I get them from the store, they're usually only good for 1, maybe 2 years before they just quit growing. So that if you want to save a lot of your own crops, you know, and you do this all right, then you only have to do a few, you know, each year, just do a few different ones. And before you know it, you've got your whole garden done, and then you start over. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. So review, planning for seed saving. So is the plant self-pollinating? You know, and if it isn't, well, I need to isolate the plant or the flowers. How many plants will I need to grow? Like, I would never really grow just one. It just seems like really limiting your, you know, odds of success in the future. So try to grow at least 2. And how long will it take before I get seeds? If you kind of work it all right, then you can have a, you know, a lovely and wonderful and productive garden, you know, that from your own work, from your own seeds for a really long time. And it's pretty great feeling to do it yourself. So if you want to know more though, that book with the crazy lettuce seed instructions is Seed to Seed by Suzanne Ashworth. And it's encyclopedic, you know, it's thick, a little bit hard to read in places, but full of information about all kinds of crops. You know, it's the most complete that I've seen so far. But there's also a simple chart, you know, just a table online at Southern Exposure Seed Exchange in their growing guides section, called Saving Seeds for Home Use. And it has like shortcuts, and it really makes you feel better. Like, it never recommends that you grow 80 of something. It tells you like the bare minimum, you know, of what will work, so that more home gardeners can be the most successful seed savers possible and, get the most out of their gardens. And so that's where I would start, like if I was a brand new, spanking new beginner, because it's an easy to use table. Um, and if you want to know more about me, I have a website, which I have totally, like, practically neglected ever since I moved because we've been very busy. But my life is like settled back down. So there will be regular blog posts again soon. And I have an email address that you are welcome to use right there. And also, I have written a couple of books. I've been having a lot of fun with my garden planner. I filled one out for 2020, and then I have started a new one for 2021 with all kinds of stuff in it.
Thank you very much, Amy. That was great.
We hope that you will find our information informative and helpful. Thanks for watching, and please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel.